Howdy, folks. In today's episode, we're talking about the current state of photography with one of the leading photography historians on the planet right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, the podcast that brings you insider insights on all things photography and videography, keeping you ahead of the curve. And as always, I'm your host, Kersten. And before we jump into it, I've got a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy this podcast, hit that subscribe button. It's free, takes just a second, and helps us continue bringing you incredible guests and conversations. More subscriber, more subscribers, more subscribe. It's like take 47. More subscribers mean even bigger and better episodes, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. Now, without further ado, please welcome today's special guest, the director of the School for Experimental Photography in Barcelona, the lecturer, historian, and co-founder of the Experimental Photo Festival. Give it up for Mr. Pablo Giori. Pablo, great to have you back on the show. Great to see you.
Thank you so much, Kersten, for having me. It's a pleasure to come here with news, ideas, and also to talk about a little bit what is happening with photography today.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it. What do you think, in your opinion, what is the current state of photography today?
I think that's a great question. Everyone is asking for. Um, I think we are in a really good mood. I mean, photography is going great. On the academical side, there are more students, there are more research, there are more books. We know more about the past, we know more about the present. We don't know more about the future because that is kind of the hard part with algorithm, EA. There are tons of debate about that. On the academical side, that's good. On the photographer side, I think there are a lot of schools, there are a lot of students, those who come more from an academical side, I mean, going to schools, but there are also a lot of amateurs, a lot of photographers doing crazy things also with experimental photography. We see it all the time. And on the side of the festivals, I also see that there are a lot of new festivals, smaller, bigger, older, newer, but people is starting to organize kind of. I want to see other things. I have the feeling that we are on this mood now. I don't know what's your opinion.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because I think it's quite, opinions differ because you have on one hand, it's absolutely true to say that it's never been easier to find information when it comes to photography. That's due to the internet and thanks to YouTube and all of these different educational outlets. So many people. There's so many great photographers who now have courses available. Which some of which I subscribe to, and they've taught me a lot. And it's really never been easier, I think, to to get hold of information. On the flip side, the other end of the spectrum, of course, there's the encroaching reality of artificial intelligence. And that, of course, is causing quite a stir, or has been causing quite a stir among many photographers, um, y- you know, enthusiasts as well as professionals, over the last maybe 2 or 3 years. And so it's sort of it's almost like a double exposure of an image. You have these exposing things where I think like, well, it's never been greater. It's never been easier to learn and to get better. But on the other hand, there's a worry that maybe the job of a photographer might be obsolete, in a not too distant future, because all of a sudden AI comes in, and are we still gonna have a job left? So it's one of these things.
Sure. I mean, I think that is a thread for the future, and I think young people is really thinking if photography is a real job, so to say, because in the end, obviously, this is hitting hard on photojournalism. Mainly, this is kind of the death of Life magazine in the 70s. This is kind of a game changer for sure. But I don't know how this is really going to arrive to more, so to say, artistic photography or those who are working with analog or experimental. I think this part of the world of photography, we are just waiting to see what happens. I mean, if it's really truth. On graphic design, it's the same. I mean, we have this artificial intelligence with Canva doing their own designs for free and in seconds. or ChatGPT taking the words of poets. But I think this is kind of a thread, at least on my side, on my experience, or with my students. They don't have yet the feeling that this is kind of the end. This is kind of something in the future. Maybe we need to be worried, and we are not, and that's a problem. But if not, at least now the feeling is that that is something that is going to happen in the future.
There's an interesting effect that I've noticed, and I noticed it before in music because, as many listeners and viewers of this podcast know, I used to have a career in music, in particular as a session musician. So I used to work a lot in studios, and I used to work a lot with recording technology. And although I started my career basically at the point when computers moved into studios, so I don't really have a lot of experience with tape. Tape was really on its last breath when I started, and computers were starting to take over. And so I spent my entire career, you know, um, basically in the digital recording realm, as it were. And the funny thing about that is as that technique became dominant in that space, and as more and more apps and plugins arrived that could all of a sudden tune your voice or tune your instrument for you. And you sort of, and of course, some people would say, like, well, no, I don't have to even be able to sing in tune anymore because I could just sing whatever and then tune it afterwards with autotune. And I remember all of these discussions, about whether that's the real thing, is it the right thing? These were the same discussions 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that were happening in the music industry that are now happening in AI. And an interesting thing happened that I noticed in music was that a lot of people, or let's say, I there's a trend all of a sudden emerging that made people look back at older technologies, and as a result, the sales of vinyl and even cassette tapes, started to pick up again. And now it's almost like, if you have a record player and you play vinyls, you're almost like a connoisseur of sonic experiences or something. And I've noticed that I've really noticed it over the last year, I have to say, that there's been a real resurgence of analog film photography. Um, and it was very evident at the photography show just recently here in London, where there were many more booths or stalls or stands that dealt with film photography. Whether there were retailers selling actual film, I've never noticed that before. I mean, there may have been a stand or two, previously in previous years, but nothing this big. There were stands, there was a camera obscura, there were, experimental stuff. It was great. It was actually fantastic to see. It was just noticeable that there was so much more of that this time
Sure.
around. And so it appears to me that it may be sort of a cyclical thing, where a new technology moves in and it's the thing, and then all of a sudden there's sort of like almost like a return loop where we come back to the technologies of old, maybe the slightly more manual technologies.
Yes, I also think that people is missing hand doing things with hands, and some people needs to go back to that. I mean, there are different things. From one side, the market is always asking for the boom of digital. Uh, I can't remember the name, but buying and selling digital images on internet. This was something huge in Twitter X. This was kind of 2 or 3 years ago that you can really buy original digital image. With all that boom out, I think people is mainly trying to go to buy originals. I mean, for doing originals, there is something about this aura of analog photography that digital doesn't have. Obviously, there is a lot of people wanting to buy digital images or even copies, but this idea of the original and the printing done by someone handmade do have meaning for those buying on the market side. And on the artistic side, there is also a lot of photographers saying, okay, myself is in that copy, because it's the light that I took that day. I print it with my hands. I frame it. There is kind of new slow timing for doing different things that I do think is important. And this is kind of a movement. And we're always debating this with my students because I have this class on the theory and the history of experimental photography. And we are arriving to the end now in March, April, and we arrive to the 70s and what happens with avant-garde, the market of art, contemporary art, how photography became contemporary art and what the market was looking for and the artists were looking for. And there is always this debate that I don't think is conclusive. I mean, I think there must be other ideas that digital kill analog, and then experimental, alternative, creative came back because it's kind of cyclical. There are tons of academicals talking about this, but I do think there are other things, Also, pandemics, for example, pandemics was really linked to a second or third, between brackets, boom of analog photography. All these people taking point and shoot cameras on parties when they were able to go again to parties. I think there is something new, people who wants to go, people who has lost a lot of possibilities of socialization, and they go to community dark rooms to work with others, doing their copies, learning photography, handmade. But I mean, it's not so different for those who are doing for example, ceramics. There is a boom in the world with ceramics, people doing things with hands, and also with yoga. I mean, we must see outside of just art or just photography and see the rest of the trends in society. And I do think there is a couple of connections with other activities that change after COVID that are linked also with this new need of going back to something with hands, places to share, nice places when you can share with others, and that's also linked with festivals. I mean, that's why there is also a huge boom of photography festivals, because people need to get together again, and the big festivals died with COVID, and we need more festivals. That's the thing. I mean, there is a need from all these young people born on social networks to share their images somewhere in these new festivals that are modern and not the same festivals that they were in the 90s or in the 2000s that were kind of huge festival. People want to have small activities, want to generate communities, want to get in touch with others, want to learn directly with the artists in workshops. I mean, I think a lot of things has changed, and we don't really know exactly what are the relationship between all these kind of some ideas that I gave.
When I think there's a number of factors involved. The pandemic's actually an interesting one because I think the pandemic, as as much as it took certain things away, like our ability to connect with other humans directly face to face, but it also opened up opportunities to do other things, to try other things, because a lot of people now had more time, and people were looking for alternative things to do to replace, at least temporarily, some of the activities that they would have done otherwise. And I think I know, I mean, without the pandemic, this podcast would have never come to pass. This is one of those typical things. But I think that would have been a great opportunity to actually start with something like film photography for a digital photographer. But there's also another thing. I think there's two sort of scenarios where people my age, and I admit to the fact that I just turned 50. So I remember a time when I was a kid. I remember a time before digital, but that was a long time ago. And there's sort of almost like a sense of nostalgia now for me to think back, having basically lived the digital age to this point. There's a sense of nostalgia thinking like, oh yeah, there used to be this other thing that was really cool. Actually, I've almost forgotten about it, but I want to get back into it because I still remember it. But then there's also that generation, the Gen Z generation that have entirely grown up in the digital world, and they're discovering the whole thing of analog photography for the first time. And so to them, it's a new thing. Like to me, it's nostalgia. To my daughter, it's a new thing, you know? And I think because we're so used to social media, especially, the younger generation, so used to sharing their content on social media. Of course, with physical, um, tangible things like actual prints, that's impossible to do. So a festival is a perfect opportunity to hang out with people and interact and share ideas in the analog realm. And again, it's a new thing. I can imagine that all of those things are true all at the same time.
Sure, sure. With another relationship between them all, who was the first? I mean, we need historians and anthropologists in the future to explain us the present, but some of these ideas are there. And also, other things are going to change. At least what I know more, that is Germany, Spain, and France. There is a huge generation of people having 70, 65, 75 or so that were born on the analog side, and they're back because they are retired, they have time, and they have a lot of money. I mean, those are who have more money than young people. And that is also going to bring a new change when they die, so to say, in the next 15 years or so, because the biggest part of the huge companies of today really lives of these people buying huge cameras, 50, 20,000 euros, that young people is not going to be able to buy in 10, 15 years. And that is, I think, going to change also the history in the future, and how these new generations arrive to these in 10, 15 years. I mean, those who are born now or who are now going for the first time to analog, that means that this is going to change. It's not just that it changed a lot now. I have the feeling that every 7 or 10 years we need to have this conversation, and we are going to have more inputs, more ideas, because things are going to keep changing in the industrial side, because we were so focused on buying huge big cameras, huge lenses, amazing. And then now you have a lot of people with iPhones, point and shoot cameras of the 90s, and lomography, plastic cameras. That is what you can buy. You are not shooting 50 rolls a year, you are just shooting in summer 5. And that is going to change not just the aesthetics, but also all the industry, that depends on this high consume. That's why sometimes they say, okay, there is a boom of analog. But what we have been studying, because we have been collaborating in a research here in Spain, there are no boom. I mean, this is something that journalists talks a lot, but there are no boom in the sense that there are no more companies. There are no more. I mean, why there are no a new factory of Kodak making more film, and why the film double the price? I mean, if Kodak knows that they need to create more, they put another factory in China, they create more film, and that's it. And they can have more and more and more. If they don't, I mean, I have the feeling that the capitalism of photography, the industry, don't see that they are going to grow on the future, at least on the analog side. And that's why they are not investing, not just on 2005 when they technically kill analog, but now. I mean, we're in 2025. They have from 2015 to 2025, on the last 10 years, they kill analog 5 times, and they were not doing new factories for creating new films. I mean, that's, at least for me, is kind of the final conclusion, saying there is no boom, because if you see the amount of film, analog film sale, is lowering and lowering, not going up.
That's an interesting observation because you're right. It's immediately juxtaposed to the impression that you get, you know, when you look at what people talk about in terms of analog film. So why do you think that is? Why do you think that although on the surface there seems to be a trend, um, why do you think companies like Kodak, for example, are not following suit? Why do you think that is the case?
Because it's not really a business. I mean, they know that this is not going to be a business in 10 years. I mean, one of the conclusions that we get on that long conversation that we get on this master thesis about the boom of, is that there are some special things. I mean, but it's not. I mean, it's really visual, and you can see a lot of analog photography on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. But when you go really to what photography is in numbers, I mean, wedding photographers, portrait photographers, I mean, those commercial or those buying thing, creating images for advertising, they're having less and less and less and less. Some of them, for example, there is a lot of fashion photography with film. That is kind of huge. That has grown 100%. But at the same time, in the 90s, every house has a camera, and all the family parties were shoot with one. And now, I mean, every home in the US in 1982, I get research, had a camera. There were more cameras than people, at least shooting 10 film a year. I mean, one film a month. That is not happening anymore. That you have a friend that get a wedding and he buy 10 point and shoots, and friends just take crazy point and shoots on a wedding or summer, doesn't mean that you are taking pictures every day or every week, how it was in the 90s, because the rest of that you are doing with your mobile phone. It's a complementary approach to analog photography, It's really visual because it goes to social networks and things. But if you really take into account, I mean, massively, how many images do we create, is the percentage is minimum of analog.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the percentage is tiny, for two reasons. One, it's not happening as regularly, obviously, because it's been replaced by and large, by digital cameras and smartphones. And of course, it's even tinier because generally, people take more images on their smartphones. Because now you have your camera in your pocket at all times. And if I look at my camera roll, I've I don't know, I have 10,000 pictures on my phone. Is that, to me, that's crazy. Just imagine what that would look like in stacks of actual prints, you know. And so that in itself is not so. Yeah, of course, as a percentage of the total, it is going to be minuscule.
Sure, that's why I think, I mean, it's important really to go to the data, to the real information about the boom. I think there are boom in some specific areas like fashion photography, point and shoot, some interbeam films. I mean, some specific things, cine still, for example. I mean, these some really specific, like they are really kind of copying filters of Instagram because these were originally filters on Instagram, and then they create the analog. I mean, because double there is a double debate. I mean, it's not just that we are going back to analog, but we are going back from a digital point of view, and on the other way around. That's why we look on analog film what digital taught us to see. We look for digital filters in analog photography, and that's why there is always this debate. Check how the colors of ACFA is. If you compare the colors with it, get closer to this Snapchat filter that we get 50 years ago. This is kind of the debate. We think, I mean, at least my generation, I'm getting 40. My generation and youngers, we think in a digital way. I mean, we are converting our digital world to analog,
That's
you know?
it's funny, yeah, absolutely, and it's
And that
funny
is also
because
what industry is doing. Sorry, and this is what industry is
yeah,
doing. they're selling us products that looks like digital filters. That's
Which is
crazy.
yeah, which is totally crazy because originally these filters, these digital filters, were basically copies of analog looks, if you want, and so it's like a complete, so it's like a copy of a copy of a copy, and with each copy, the copy's going to get worse. Just like a photocopier.
I don't know if worse, but I want just to be clear that it's not analog and digital. We live in a mixed world in all aspects. I mean, we have been, I just read something today. We have learned how to shoot for Instagram. That means that even all the photographers that are taking pictures today in analog, they take pictures as they take with their phone because they think on their phone on the way of doing their images, even if they take it with analog. That's why it does, or they take it in analog and then they scan it and share it on social network. That is a digital thing, and then they print it. I mean, there is a dialogue, a complete dialogue, and a mix, a conceptual mix from your pre-visualization of the image till the last printing, editing, and intervention and experimentation, if you want. Both are in dialogue between digital and analog. It's not one thing or the other, and the industries know that. That's the thing, and that's kind of the next level.
It's super interesting, just I mean, I'm just thinking about what you just said, and you're absolutely right. Because even in my head, that's exactly the process that's happening. Just to give you an example, over the last year, I really got into shooting medium format film. Black and white film. I have a Mamiya C330, which I love. I love the process. It's a beautiful camera and it's in really good nick as well. So it's no light leaks or anything. It's actually a beautiful little machine. I love the fact that it's a machine. There's no electronics in that thing. It's all mechanical. It has feedback. There's something. It's just something. It's a beautiful process. I love the fact that it slows me down. There's no rushing that thing, and I also develop at home, and I like that. I love that process as well. It reminds me of when my dad used to develop film at home, and I can, although, so I'm a little bit disappointed because so it's some film photographers out there will regard this as a cop out. I know, I realize that, but I like to use DF 96 monobath Cinestill, which is a one time developer fix it all mixed into one. You don't need to have different chemicals. It's just a very simple process. That's exactly it's how I like it, simple. Um, but then I scan the images digitally and then I process them digitally. So it's like a mixed economy, where it's sort of it's almost like the Borg, I think, the Borg in Star Trek. It's a little bit organic and a little bit machine, all mixed in together. Um,
Sure.
but that's yeah, so that's to me, again, it's like a mixed, you're right, it's like a mixed process.
And from a historical point of view, it's the same. I mean, when photography started, the idea was you have to print it because a printed image paper is going to get longer. Because even silver gelatin in glass is going to destroy with weather. And they say, okay, we need to go to paper. Paper is going to be forever, blah, 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 blah. This was 108 years ago. And now when we go and see those papers are almost destroyed by light. And now we are back and we say, no, we need to digitalize everything. And that's why the biggest collections of the world are digitalizing all their collections. We did a Talbot exhibition last year on Experimental Photo Festival with exhibitions with images from the Talbot collection. He has more than 50,000 images in 7 different countries, from 8020s, more or less. Almost, there were some of them that they were more than 200 years. Some of them are dying. I mean, the digital ones done in the 90s were better than the digital ones done now because it has been modified with these 30 years. But now we need to go to digital again. That's the crazy, because we think we have the feeling now that paper is going to die. Because if there is a flow or then you take the images and something get wrong. I don't know why you need to digitalize everything. That is kind of the future. Obviously, this is the business of Google, iPhone, and everything for using the internet databases, obviously, but this is what we know now. And my father, he was always saying, no, we need to keep our box of images. We need to keep our family album because everything is there. And now that has changed totally. And that is a new way of seeing. When we go to digital, when we go to analog, we see it from a different place, from my generation, from the generation of my fathers, or even yours, or even different countries. The way that we relate with analog or digital technologies are crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy on one hand. There's a certain beauty to that as well because it's because these technologies are kind of flowing into each other and adding to each other I mean, there's always elements that you lose, and you know I sort of I mentioned it earlier. To me, what we've lost in digital technology, in digital picture taking technology, as in cameras, we've lost the consideration and the taking the time and the thought process in taking the picture, because it's so easy and we can just we can take 100 pictures and pick the best one. You know, there's a there's an involvement in the picture taking process that we've lost that way. And this is the thing that I've discovered. I love that. I love being in that process. I remember, a little while ago, and I kind of mentioned this several times on the show. Um, a friend of mine and I we went into central London to Chinatown, um, because we thought it was a beautiful day, blue skies, and I don't know if you've ever been, but it's from a color perspective on a blue sky day, which arguably it doesn't happen very often here in London. But it's from a color contrast point of view, it's a beautiful place to be because you have a lot of golden statues of Chinese sort of art. You have a lot of red lanterns, and you've got a blue sky, and so these colors just harmonize with each other really well, and it's just a beautiful place to take some color imagery, right? And so our intention was to go and to shoot one roll of medium format film, which, if you're lucky, on my Mamiya, you'll get 10 frames out of that roll, right? If you're lucky. Um, so that took all afternoon, because the process is so slow and considered. And that's the thing. My that is something I've rediscovered in a sense. Um, those experiences, I think there's a certain importance, I think, to teach those sort of processes. And we mentioned it, or you mentioned it at the start. Photo festivals, I think, play a really important role in bringing those sort of experiences to more people. Um, what's the landscape of photo festivals like at the current moment, since, let's say, post pandemic?
I think we are in a really good moment. I mean, from the research that we are doing, we are organizing the first international associations of festivals. In the past, there were one that was called the Festival of Light, that they organized more or less 20 festivals in the world, but it has never ever exist an international associations of festivals. I mean, we have never had these kind of international connections over the last 5 years after the pandemics. New networks in different continents and countries started. I mean, the Spanish and Portuguese one, Association of Festivals, started on 2020. There is a French one now that started 2 years ago. There is one called Asia Pacific. They were older. They were kind of classical ones, but there is an analog association also in the world that they have like 12, 13 festivals. It's good one. We are also part of them, but they were born over the last 3 or 4 years. This means that in the past there were not so many opportunities to get together really from an international point of view and connect and contact with others. And that also talks about of this new generation of younger festivals that are used as you as me to get in touch in digital. I mean, when we do the meetings, we don't call festivals by phone. We coordinate in a group of WhatsApp. We have 300 people in a group of WhatsApps of all directors, coordinators, accountants, graphic designers of festivals in the world on that WhatsApp group, and we say, okay, we need to do a meeting about this theme. We just ask for different dates, and then people vote for the best dates, and then we get a conversation in Zoom with 100 people, and we do one in Spanish, one in English. We did also one in Italian and one in French for talking with the communities. But you need to have all these abilities. I mean, to speak in different languages, to connect through internet, to have this WhatsApp. I mean, that is great, and that was not possible in the past. I think the revolution that we get with Instagram in 2010, 2015, that you were able to connect with everyone worldwide, that you were able as a photographer to show your images everywhere and to contact. I think now that revolution has arrived 10 years later to the festivals. I mean, now the festivals, we are using the same technology to connect with other festivals and also to get more international. In the end, I have the feeling that people are looking for new things. I mean, photographers to learn new techniques, audiences to see new images. And these images are probably outside of your borders. If you can broke these borders, obviously you can bring new content. And that is great, because if not, what happens in the past, you depend a lot of curators, because the curators were those kind of, from an academical point of view, moving artists from one festival to the others, and they were kind of big names. Those curators became really expensive. Those names became really expensive, and a lot of new people came from social networks mainly over the last 10 years, and all these new factories of photographers. I mean, new schools, new opportunities on Instagram, new festivals. And all these festivals, they don't want really to depend just on traditional markets, so to say, these traditional markets of galleries, curators. They want to look for new people. And that's where open calls start playing a huge role. I mean, nowadays you can open a call on internet and you can get 600 projects, in a month. And you can know what the state of photography in the world is in a month. Receiving, as we receive for Experimental Photo Festival, proposals from 65 countries. That has never ever happened in the past. We don't need a curator to give us the content. We can generate what we want. And being so powerful also requires to get connect with other to learn how to do it. And this is why we want to connect with other festivals, because we need a lot of things to teach between us, because the world of festivals has changed so much over the last 5 years. We need to sit, talk, and explain what we have been doing, because some of them are good on generating communities. Some of them are good on communications. Some of them are good on exhibitions, on founding, on gender equality, on ecology, but none of them are good on everything. And having these spaces for sharing experiences, I think, or we work for having a massive influence in the world of photo festivals. I mean, we need to get them more international, we need to get them more modern, and we need to give them more content to choose from, because that's the thing. There are so many people interested in showing their art. They need spaces, and they are not having them now. And we have 627 active festivals in the world. Put your content there.
That's actually pretty incredible. I mean, it's 627 photography festivals worldwide. That's it's an incredible task actually to first of all coordinate all of that. Um, but I think from a learning potential point of view, it's pretty amazing because if you could share the experiences of all of those festivals, you know, um, in a way that everybody can benefit from it, then you basically you're creating a situation where you're in an optimal position to carry that message forward, if that makes any sense.
I was just taking notes. Yes, I mean, I have the feeling now that we are now numbers. I mean, we are 627. We need to get faces. We need to give hands. We need to drink beers. We need to make more personal contacts. And that's why we are organizing this first international meeting in Barcelona, that we have 36 festivals already confirmed that they are coming. This is 3, 4, 5 of July in Barcelona. At least these 35 festivals, we want at least to have 50 or 60 or 70s. But we need to get in touch. I mean, we need to be there 2, 3 days together. And then when we get confidence in others, because humans, we need time, to understand that the other one is not a competitor, that the other one has something to give us. And that's crazy. I mean, it's hard. This is kind of the first step. You make a decision of coming to a meeting of festivals. That means that in some aspects you're looking for something. I mean, you're not so comfortable in the way that you are doing, or you think that you have something to teach, or you want others to give you something. And then you go there, and then you need a day, or a day and a half, to get in confidence with the space, with the weather, with the people. And then it's the moment when you really start exchanging, when you can open your heart, at least with 5, 10 people, and try to find opportunities, to understand and learn from others, the good things and the bad things, and also what you need and what the others need. For example, there is something that we talk a lot on our meetings about: exchanging exhibitions. uh, these photo festivals, we are 600. Now we are doing a research for creating the first report on the state of all the festivals in the world. We are going to present this over the meeting to know what does it mean. I mean, how many people work, how many money, how many artists, how many exhibitions. But for you to get an idea, more or less the festivals do 20 exhibitions. We have 600 festivals that we know there must be more, 700 for 20 exhibitions a year. We have 1,500 exhibitions printed every year on the festivals on the world. Every year. You know what happened with the 90% of them? Or they go to garbage, or they are saved by the authors somewhere, or by this festival somewhere. But the 90% of those exhibitions that we create every year are not being exhibited anymore. This, from the ecological point of view, is huge, is massive, is something that we need to debate. It's not possible to keep generating this amount of garbage, so to say, if we are not going to use it anymore. From the economical side, is a huge problem, because we're spending a lot of money, and from the side of the artist makes no sense, because we're just bringing more and more exhibitions and more artists and more, but we are not showing their work as much as possible. That's why we truly believe that if we are able to share these exhibitions, this is kind of the first thing that you can do for ecology, for the authors, and also for getting confidence between festivals. I don't have nothing to lose. I give you an exhibition, you give me an exhibition, and we exchange. And let's see how it goes. The first year on this exchange, it can be different countries, it can be different themes, and then we can really start recycling these images, giving the authors more opportunities. But that is what we are thinking now. Okay, we are having people in Barcelona, we have festivals. What they need? They need to exchange exhibitions, they need content. Okay, what we can do? We can teach them how to do better open calls. Okay, bring Picture. We are going to bring Picture, Emily, and their team to Barcelona to explain how to do amazing open calls. You need to exchange exhibitions, because you don't want to keep this exhibition locked for your full life and then kill them when you don't have more money. Okay, let's exchange. We are preparing the program of the meeting for exchanging exhibition. All the festivals are going to bring 3 exhibitions. They are going to exchange 3 exhibitions with different festivals, and see how this grow, for the next year, how these international connections, because it's also not the same. For example, if you have a festival, medium, small, and you say, okay, on my program of the next year, I'm going to have an exhibition with this festival and this festival. And then you can go to those who give you money, uh, private, public, wherever you bring your money. And you can say, but look, We are not just now on this town or in this city. We are part of this international association. We are collaborating with others. We are bringing exhibitions from Italy, from Norway to our festival. I think, and we truly believe this is kind of the next level, when we really take benefits of this communication, this modernity, this ability of exchanging, or what was opened with pandemics in the end. This is what we are talking about. As the podcast, all the content creator, this is arriving to photo festivals, and this is what we are trying to lead. These spaces of connection, when people can really find new ways of doing things for the new reality we are living in.
If you take a slightly sort of wider angle view, what is it do you think that makes a photo festival successful?
The question is, what is a photo festival and what is success?
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
um, I think, I mean, those were mainly for asking about bad photo festivals. What I think the true photographers want and the communities want is creating communities. I mean, I do have the feeling that what you want to do is have experience and you want to create a community. I mean, if you go to a festival alone, you have to go back home with 5 friends for going the next year. You know, I think in this sense, photography festivals must become more closer to music festivals. That is something that you do every year, you do with your friends, and you get experience, physical experience, food, drink, learning, singing, strong emotions. It's not just go to see an exhibition and wait for God to show you something in this quiet and silently context. That is not what young people is looking for. You know what I mean? Obviously, if you're going with great masters, you need to take your time and everything. But young generations, they don't want that. They want experience. They want to do cyanotype with people. They want to watch it here, show it there. They want to go to the beach and do crazy things. I mean, they want to try. They want to play. They don't want to calculate exactly the amount of timing exact that you need to have a perfect copy on black paper and wait 3 months for having the best copy. People want to play. This is kind of the best open to start. And at least for me and my experience on Experimental Photo Festival and what I see from the festivals that were born over the last 5 or 7 years, those who are more successful are those who are working in a community and for a community. When I say in a community, I mean that it's not one people or two people organizing it. It's a nonprofit organization of friends, or it's a group, or it comes from a magazine. I mean, there is kind of a reason for them to get together, and they have enough money and energy and willingness to collaborate for different years, because a festival you always need at least 4 or 5 years really to see something growing. I mean, for people to take it seriously, you need time, you need that. I mean, you need to know who is your team, and you need to know exactly who is your audience. And to create this audience, you need to give them experience and you need to talk to them directly. And that is something that we can do perfectly with social networks and other things. Who is going to be there? Is not it's not it's not like in the past that, for example, you say, okay, I'm going to do a festival. I don't care if people is coming, or there are no other activities. People is going to come because there are no other activities in town, and people is going to come. No, people is not going to come. If you don't pay advertisings, if you don't put it in social networks, if you don't arrive to newspapers, people is not going to come. I mean, people is watching images on their phone full day and they don't know who your names are. Even if they are big, they don't know. You need to invite them to do something interesting. You need to find a way to connect with them. If not, they're not going to pass by and spend £7 or €5 or €15 to see 5 exhibitions, because there are museums that are for free and they have free internet and they have free everything. You need to give them workshops.
And experiences. I mean, I think you know, hit the nail on the head. It really is all about experiences and, you know, to a degree, hands-on experiences, you know, whether they're educational or whether they're actually just hands-on. You know, one of the things that I think was one of the most notable things at big shows, big commercial shows, you know, like the photography show, for example, or something like Imaging USA that I've just been to, was one of the things I noticed was that those booths, well, a number of things. One, there's definitely been a major increase in added on photographic experience spaces, you know, and they predominantly trying to engage people to have fun, you know, like setups where they call it, what do they call it? The creator walk, I think, which is like lots of different setups where you can do crazy things. You know, it's like a skateboard setup and then it's like a Donkey Kong setup and some, you know, just crazy stuff where you could just jump in, take some crazy pictures and just have some fun. You know, this is not aimed at artists or anything. It's actually aimed at content creators, you know, people who take pictures for Instagram or for social media. But what I noticed was I saw a lot of people just having fun in there, not just young, you know, 20 something or under 20, like, you know, content creators, but older people as well. They just, you know, just had just as much fun. And I noticed that people were talking about these spaces afterwards, you know, so it's definitely left an impression on them. So that goes to the sense of community and, you know, and doing something that's hands on. But the other thing I noticed also that those booths that actually had hands-on things that people could touch and play around with, those were much busier than the booths that just had screens. It's the emerging, you know, I mean, it's the time of AI companies. There were a lot of AI companies there, and it's predominantly just screens with like software demos. And I found that these booths were actually relatively empty. You know, it was those where people could pick up stuff and play around with stuff, you know, and try out things. These were definitely busier. So it really goes to show that, you know, you know, gearing something towards experiences. Oh, and then I just add that the education spaces, the educational spaces, the stages were busy all day long. You know, and that was true for all the shows that I've seen this year. And again, you know, and I always say that you know, if you only go to a show like that just because you think there's a bargain to be had, you know, and you can save some money on a lens, you're sort of completely missing the point of these shows. It's the education and the community and the networking. That's really the most powerful thing about a show like that. You know, the community spirit. If you're an enthusiast and you might go with some camera club friends and you just have a nice day out, and it's just a thing that you do every year because it's a nice day out, that's fine. On a professional level, it's the networking, you know, to find people who are in the same industry that you can, you know, converse with and exchange ideas with and, you know, improve your own, you know, photography, maybe your own business, whatever, you know, the thing is. The educational things that you can pick up to do with, you know, image making, maybe a transition into video, which is something that is happening for many stills photographers nowadays. Of course, the need to upskill, so to say, into video because so you know, so the social media monster, you know, wants to eat more and more video content. So you know, that's the thing that a lot of stills photographers are afraid of, and it's about you know, it's about knowledge basically. That's really what it boils down to. Um, You know, but also just to be able to exchange, you know, yeah, just to exchange, you know, talking about worries, fears, the state of the industry and the business, this and that, and exchanging like ideas. So, you know, this happened and I tried this and that really worked, or this really didn't work, you know, all of these things that are important when you are in an industry that is by and large fairly solitary. You know, and I think that is the biggest thing about these kind of commercial shows from an end user's perspective. Of course, not from a corporate business perspective, because they're there to sell, you know, clearly. I mean, that's that. But, you know, I look at it from from a photographer's, from a human perspective. These are the things that I find are super valuable when it comes to those sort of things. There is a limit, however, in um, how non-conventional some of the displays are. You're never really going to get into the realm of like an experimental photo festival. You're never really going to get to the point where you can really be super creative and have things that are so far out there, you know, that they because you're then talking to a very sort of niche audience, and that's the difference. But it's like you said, it's about catering for your audience, and
Sure,
dialing it, calibrating it just right for your general audience.
sure. And knowing what they want. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Um, I think something that has also changed now with festivals, for example, we have thematic festivals now that they were not like that in the past. I mean, normally all photography festivals in the 90s and 2000s were like kind of contemporary photography in general. I mean, they were doing historical, but they were doing in general. But now we have festivals of street photography that is getting crazy. I mean, that is kind of thematic.
Yeah.
I think this year we have 3 or 4 in the meeting, but on our database, I think we have 15. Um, we have 15 analog photography festivals. We have just for women's, there are 3 in the world. There is one for experimental photo festival. I mean, we're getting more and more and more and more specifics with festivals because they are it's easier to arrive to specific communities, with social networks and so. And I think that is also changing everything, and that's what how you need to know your audiences, and that is something that we debate a lot. For example, when we go to small towns and they have a festival that is organized mainly for the city and is mainly think for the people of the city, bringing artists from their own country, that then, as this is already paid by the government, and this is happening a lot, at least in Europe, as this is paid by the government, it doesn't matter if there are audiences or not. And this was something totally curious and contradictory during pandemics because they were festivals, and we debate a lot about this. They were festivals that they don't want people on their rooms, and they didn't make any kind of advertising about the festival. They were just because if you have people, you have the possibility of getting more COVID, and then that the festival is canceled. But if you get in that context, I want to get into the idea that there are some festivals in some concrete moments of history that you don't need your audience, you know? Because the festival is already paid or the audience can be a problem. This was kind of the context where we are coming from. Or this is paid by the companies because they want to sell and you don't need to worry about explaining or talking to your community, or even you don't need to create the community. There are a lot of festivals even now that they just publish on social networks 3 months a year. I mean, even something free as Instagram, they are not publishing the full year. I mean, they are losing their community every year and they are starting again. At least from my point of view of a of a 30, almost 40 years old, that is crazy. I mean, how you're creating a community in internet and then you stop publishing for 8 months till your festival is already ready again to
Yeah.
be shown. This is a community. I mean, you need to talk directly to your community. You need to make them videos every month. I mean, you need to give them information. You need to get them connected. That has changed a lot. That's what I said. Things has changed a lot over the last 5 years. I mean, growing photo festivals. We need all social networks. We need advertising. We need find a way to contact with people if we need to live in a different economy. I mean, we can live on this traditional economy of someone paying for everything, and that's it.
Well, and the problem with that, of course, is that in a time when economies are buoyant and there are budgets for the arts, I remember. I remember living in Germany in the 80s, or in the 90s, and there was plenty of money switching around for lots of exhibitions and things, and you'd go there, and it would, like you said, there would hardly be anybody there, and you wonder, how can I do this? It's like, um, and of course, I also remember in the 2000s, around 2009, 2010, when a lot of economies started to tank, and the first thing that goes is money for the arts. It's the first thing that gets cut. And then you're in a position where all of a sudden the arts have to apply some, you know, uh, some basic general economic principles. Like advertising, marketing in particular. And it's that can potentially feel alien to start with because it's not something that people are used to in the arts, and it's often said that artists are terrible businessmen. you know, because and it makes perfect sense because you concern yourself so much with your art, and I know this. When I grew up as a musician, I wanted to be a musician. I didn't want to be a marketer. You know, and it was exactly the same thing in the music industry. Throughout the 80s and 90s. Your sole goal in a band was to get signed by a major record label. That was your goal. That's what you wanted to
Sure,
do, because you thought like, well, that's it then. They're gonna sell the product basically. They do all the marketing, and that's where we can make money or we can make a living, as a musician. That has
sure,
so radically changed today. Now you have no chance in hell unless you have already built your own audience. And in order to do that, you have to market yourself. And I always say this, like, as a podcaster, for example, you know, it's an interesting thing because, compare what people like me do now to how this same show would have been produced 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you would have had a presenter, you would have had a producer, you would have had a sound engineer, probably, a video mixer. You would have had somebody who would have to broadcast the whole thing. It would have just been infinitely more difficult to make something like this and send it around the world for people to watch or listen to. Now I can do this myself sitting in my living room, basically, you know? But also what that means is I now need to be much more. I now need to be the photographer. I need to be the host. I need to be the presenter. I need to be the producer. I need to be the guy who deals with the technology. I need to be the sound mixer. I need to write the scripts. I need to be the person who gets in touch with potential guests. I need to be all of these things. And if I'm only good at the photography, I would never be able to do all of this. So now as a one person, you now have to there's a need to upskill immensely. So in one way, we have all these opportunities now. On the other hand, there's much more demand on acquiring other skills to do that too.
sure. But it's the same. I mean, I think the comparison with music is perfect because we need also in photography, we need producers and we need managers. I mean, because we have the feeling that photography is just the artist, but that's not the reality. I mean, on the photo festivals, we have all these people. I mean, we have the producers, the managers, the curators, the directors, the those in charge of communication, graphic design, advertising. I mean, and this is obviously if you want to become a modern festival, you need to learn how to do them all because we are the producers of the
Yes.
festivals. I mean, we are the directors. We are not the artists. It's kind of two different worlds. It's kind of the musicians. Obviously, the musicians need a manager that says, "Okay, I'm going to negotiate for you this concert there, and I'm going to negotiate this concert there." And this is what the festivals do. We need to organize ourselves. We need to professionalize ourselves. We can't just be old curators with good taste saying, okay, I want to have this and this and this. Okay, that's not even the beginning. I mean, this is 1% of the job of someone working a festival. Choosing the artist is 1% of the job. The rest is 99% of sending emails and looking for funding. you know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, funding. That's I mean, that's of course that's always the question. Where's the money come from? And it's exactly the same. I mean, again, it's the same in music. It's the same in podcasting. It's an interesting thing. I've just literally just replied to a comment actually on one of the episodes where somebody said, "Oh, you know, there were 16 ads in this episode, which is terrible. Don't be so greedy." And I'm thinking, well, I mean, two things. One, I don't have no control over how many ads there are in this episode. That it is completely outside of my control. Um, but also, as a creator, I'm earning pennies, you know, and I'm actually, I'm creating a lot of stuff that you can consume for free, you know. So cut me some slack. I mean, even if there are 16 ads in this episode, you still get it for free. I'm not asking you to pay, a subscription fee or anything like that. And I'm not really not making any money. Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
So, on the point of greedy, yeah, somebody is greedy. It's definitely not the creator, it's like complain to the platform. Do you know what I mean?
sure.
So it's true. I mean, it's, you're always y the biggest thing is funding, and, putting a festival together, if you think of it as a product, creating a product is only the starting point. It's getting people to I mean, in a commercial world, it's getting people to buy that product. That's the difficult part, to in many respects, making the product actually relatively straightforward.
That's the funny part, yes, but the hard part is to sell it.
Yeah,
Um, and the first thing of all for trying to sell something to someone is know who this someone is.
exactly.
You need to generate this community, and we go back to the beginning of the conversation. You need to know your community. You need to make a festival for your community, from a community. I mean, having your own team, strong team, because it's a long way. And then you need to talk to someone directly. I mean, you need to have your community and do the festival that your community needs. And for that, you need to know how to reach them, what they want, and what they are going to do. And after that, if you can find public funding, private funding, and you can make this community to pay a little bit for the content, maybe you have three different sources of funding that can give you the money to make your festival, but probably not to live out of it, because that is another problem, that we spend a lot of money doing the festivals, but the amount that we receive as producers is really slow. And this is one of the really small, I wanted to say, and this is one of the debates that we are having also in our community. Okay, how much do you pay the same to you for your amount of hours of the money that you pay to the artist? I mean, the artist need the festival need the artist. Okay, if I pay the artist, someone must pay myself for my work of creating the festival. If not, the festival is dead, and the artist, the photographer, didn't receive the money. And we are starting this debate in the community saying, okay, but you're paying the same for hours to the photographer than to yourself, because if you don't pay, we don't have a future. And in 5 years or 7 or 10 years, if you get kids and five jobs, and I don't know why, you're just going to quit. There are not going to be a generational exchange, and then your festivals die, and we are on the same spot. We need sustainability on festivals. It's not just reaching money for artists, it's also recognizing that our work of cultural managers, of producers of festivals, directors, curators, whatever, need to be paid, and not just the huge curators, but everyone, organizing the festival. We need to respect ourselves first. And that is kind of part of the huge debate, where to bring the money and when to spend it. Also, because we always have this idea, this is we do it because we love photography, and that's why we are going to do more and more exhibitions and better. But maybe now is the time to think, okay, maybe now is the time to pay to ourselves, for the work that we are doing.
Yeah, the problem is, and this is again, end users, I would say, don't necessarily realize that. You know, in first of all, in creating anything like this, whether it's a festival or a podcast or a YouTube channel or whatever it may be, there are costs involved. It's not a zero sum game. It's not like, okay, well, I'm going to put the show on and it's not going to cost anything. And so therefore, all I have to invest is my time. Um, and so therefore, I should do it because I love to do it. The reality is, it is my time. And of course, you could say there's value to that time. But there are also costs. I mean, the actual costs, whether it's subscription fees, hosting fees for the podcast, blah, 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 equipment, all that kind of stuff, it all comes together. And the fact of the matter is that if I didn't at least have some financial compensation to some degree, then of course I would have to use my time elsewhere doing a different job so that I can, feed my kids and make sure that my kids have Netflix. you know, or the internet or whatever it is that they're into. So the reality is that, unless you can afford to actually make a living, you're going to have to do something else that allows you to
Sure.
make a living because
I mean,
nobody,
if you want to become a professional, you need to earn money more or less. That you need to earn
sure,
money to take time to have time to make it professional and have the time that requires love, time, and knowledge that you need to make your job professionally. And then we go back to community. When we started with Experimental Photo Festival, we knew our community. They don't have money. We don't have money. We do things without nothing the first 3 years with our time. Um, the first that we did is we started with gender equality, having between 50 and 60% of women doing the activities. And then I was personally really strong with economical transparency because I said we need to explain our community that all the money that we are using is not our money because we didn't have even a public funding at that moment. We were just using the money of those paying for doing workshops to organize the festival. And we thought it was a great opportunity, and we are the only festival that we have it like this. And you can see on our webpage what is my salary, the salary of the rest of the people, how many money do we spend in loanings, in insurance, in technology, in the artists. I mean, we have everything detailed. And we say, okay, you think we explain everything, the percentage of the money of each of the tickets that goes for everything. And then we say, okay, you think that this is expensive? If we don't spend free time from our side, I mean, without volunteer work, this might cost almost double. This is the real cost of everything we do. Do you think it's expensive? No, it's really cheap because I'm paying half of your ticket
in your time. Yes, absolutely.
because I love it. It's good. I receive other compensations, whatever you want, but we need to educate also audiences that when you consume something, you make this thing happen again. This is what is crazy that we don't understand that in culture we are so powerful. If you go to the cinema, this movie is going to play again or another movie is going to be made. If you don't go to movies, movies are not going to be made anymore. It's not like food. It's not like cars. You don't buy a car, but cars are going to exist forever. Or you don't eat this food and you eat another one, but you need to eat. It's something that it's mandatory for you to make a decision, so to say. And your decision is important if you want to buy one brand or the other. But the existence of this product doesn't depends on you. In culture, if you love something, you need to buy it and you need to use it and you need to share it because if not, it's dead. We are so powerful in cultural consumption that we don't get that idea because we are taught that culture is for free because someone is going to do it because someone likes it. And that's why we do believe that in the cultural world we need to respect ourselves and we need to try to educate our communities to understand why they have to pay. If they are public funding, if they're private funding, and if they have to pay, okay, someone is paying for things. If not, I'm paying this. And when I don't find any retribution for my work, I'm going to quit. And then you are going to not have no festival. And then you are going to feel bad because you don't have the festival anymore. You know what I mean? It's important that people understand how important is going to places, and consuming culture.
Absolutely, and, it's the exact same conversation in music, and it's an age-old conversation, I remember when, I was in my 20s, and the amount of times that people would say to me, "Hey, do you wanna come to my party?" And I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that sounds cool," and the next sentence would be, make sure you bring your guitar 'cause, I'd love to hear you play." And I'd be like, Okay, so now is this a job? Because if it's a job, you need to pay me. Like, do you just want me to come to entertain your guests?" Because now it's a job, so now we have to talk about money. Um, but if you just, because if you just want me to come to play the guitar for everybody, then that's kind of not really that fair because now I'm doing a thing that you want me to do rather than me just going and having a good time. Now you're asking me to work for you, you know? And then, of course, the next thing, very often it's like, "Oh, it's great exposure, it's gonna be lots of people there." It's like, "Yeah, but I can't pay my rent with exposure." If I could pay my rent and my water bill, or my food bill with exposure, then fantastic. But I actually need, I need hard cash. So,
Sure,
but, it's exactly the same conversation in any in any segment of the arts or entertainment, um, forevermore.
sure. And I think it's important to know who are you working with. I mean, because we were always with this debate. Okay, if we charge as producers the 30% of my time, I mean, if I get paid for just the 30% or the 20% of the hours that I'm using, I have to pay to the artist 20% of the time that this artist is using. What is not possible is that I charge 100% and give the artist 20, and it's not also normal or good that the artists receive 100% and you don't receive nothing. We need to do that, and also you need to generate a relationship of trust, and this is generated by this economical transparency because your musicians or your audiences know where the money come from, what you are using the money, how much you are receiving, and how much you are paying to everyone. And they say, okay, I'm going to come to your festival because you're not paying me a lot, but I know that you are doing this on the same way that I'm doing. I mean, no one is taking profits of the other. And this is the most important. If not, there are always this comment, no, but I went, but they pay me something, but there are other people that were paid better. And you say, okay, but why someone were paid better and the other one was not paid at the same time? I mean, which relationship you generate with your artists or with your audience if they don't know what you do with their money, if they don't know about taxes, if they don't know how much you charge, how much you time you dedicate to this. I mean, all this information is so useful and it's so easy as putting a transparency, an economical transparency webpage and talking about this. I mean, it's money. Money is a reality in this capitalist world that we live in, and we can just explain it. What we do, what we want to do, what our community needs, what our artists do, and just find a way to connect with your community, explain what you want to do with which money, and people is going to be happy to collaborate for sure. From your
Exactly.
team and from your participants, they are going to pay because they know that you are with a goodwill of creating something for everyone, and that's
Transparency is
good.
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency is actually key. I mean, the amount of times that I've heard that, bands, for example, if we just related to music one more time, the amount of times that I've heard that bands have split up once they realize how much the other band member got paid in relation to themselves is unbelievable. I've been in a position before, where I got hired for a gig, and I sit down with the drummer, after sound check, just over a drink, and the drummer goes, "Oh man, I wouldn't normally do this gig for this amount of money." And I'd be like, "What? You are getting paid that much? I'm not getting paid that much. Wait a minute, what's going on?" And then I remember there's one situation where I had to sit down with the guy who ran the band, and I basically said we were in Wales, right? So about was it 6 hours drive from where I'm now. And I remember sitting down with the guy who ran the band, and this was like 2 hours before the gig, 2 hours before the show, and I said to him like, "Look, I just had a chat with the drummer. I realized he gets paid this much. You up my salary, or I'm getting in the car and I'm driving home, and then you don't have a guitar player, and I don't care." So, I'm not asking for more money than the next guy, but I'm definitely not gonna accept less, you know? And at that point, it was like, well, my salary went up very quickly. But, sometimes, I mean, but that's the thing. Transparency is absolute key. Had that be totally had that been totally, transparent from the beginning, then you have a choice, because you can then say, "Well, I'm not gonna do it for this much," you know? You have a choice. You can basically say, "Well, I'll do something else." Um, but, by keeping things artificially, non-transparent is never a good idea. But you're right, there's a balance. I think there's a balance for everyone. There's a balance for the organizers. There's a balance for the artists. There's also a balance for, the consumers, the visitors of a festival to make sure that there's transparency and also that everybody gets fairly compensated. Do you think that that local government or even national governments do play a role in funding festivals like this, or should that should that role be more prominent, or should it not be? Should it be a situation where these sort of festivals need to be self-sufficient? Where do you think that balance is?
That is pretty hard because the biggest part of the festivals are uh, free and open for everyone, and they are really using public spaces for compensate. I mean, when you are using a museum gallery, the amount of money that is going for this gallery in the normal time, now you are using it for the festival to schedule these months during the year. It's not. Um, I mean, there are different ways that public funding gets into what you are looking for, but the biggest part of the things are free. That's the thing. When you have a free festival that people is not paying for entrance, how can you finance it? If you don't have public funding. Obviously, if you are going to an industry show as the ones that you are more used to go, obviously that is kind of conference. People is paying for something in concrete, but the biggest part of the festivals, they are small festivals and they are doing things for free, exhibitions for free. And someone needs to pay for that. That's why what I think is the best is multiple funding. I mean, having private is the harder one, but try to have some private, have public, have friends with money, and also ask your audience to pay as much as they can for what they are doing. If they are seeing exhibitions, maybe it's 10 euros. I don't know if they are doing a workshops, maybe it's 100. That depends on the country of the situation. But if everyone's can put a little bit of money, if something happened with the rest of the sources of financing, you are not going to die because that's the other problem. If you're just private, when your biggest company get out, you are dead. Or if you're just working with a town, when this town decides that they want to do theater and not photography, your festival is out and you're out. That's why I do think the most sustainable thing for photo festivals in general is to find all the ways possible to receiving at least a little bit of money from everywhere.
I think the balance that's very tricky is, and this sort of links back into the beginning of this conversation about audiences, is the fact that when you get a municipality or local government, for instance, or even the national government, like in the UK, we have something called the National Lottery that funds a lot of enterprises like that. Um, they so in a sense need to see some kind of return, not monetary return, but return in the way of engagement. Um, what I mean is, if they're funding a festival and then nobody comes, they're not really going to fund that again. They need to see the return in the fact that it attracts a crowd of people, and the engagement is there. And it garners engagement, because that's where the value is all of a sudden. Um, and in order for that to happen, it's important to really to address the right audience. So the question is, with festivals like that, is it does it make sense to focus on a younger crowd, perhaps, like a crowd that's maybe into mobile photography? A crowd that uses, um, y- you know, uh, processing apps on mobile. Is that the way to go, or is the way to go to focus on the crowd that has the money, which are the middle aged guys, at the end of their career that have the disposable income?
I think that this is a solution for 10 years. I mean, if you work just with young people in 10 years, they are going to have families and they are not going to be your audience again. And if you just work with old people in 10 years, they are not going to be there anymore, to be politically correct. I mean, you need to talk to everyone. I mean, you need to find your audience that is a growing audience. It's not a limited audience. It's an audience that is changing. That's why we are the festivals are working better and better with themes. Those interested in nature. Those interested in alternative, creative, experimental. Those interested in portrait, because you are always going to have young and old people interested in these kind of themes. Um,
So
that's
does
why
it
I think is important.
and that's actually, this is the eternal question. It's specification versus diversity. That's the underlying question that you find in business a lot, in the photography business, a lot. You have those, who would say, well, you could specialize, you could niche down, you could get the best, become the best in your little tiny little niche, and that's where the value is. You know, you can charge more for weddings if you're doing a very, very specific thing. You find your very specific audience that want that particular thing, and because you're the best at that, they'll be happy to pay you more than they would for a regular, average wedding photographer, for example. Same in portrait photography, same in headshot photography, same in anything. And then, of course, there are those that say, well, you're now focusing on a very small market because with more specificity, you're narrowing down the market, and the overall volume of your market will now shrink, right? And so the skill now is in being laser focused in communicating with that market. That's it's going to become more and more difficult because now you're trying to find a very, very small slice of the cake. So some people will say, well, diversity is a better strategy because you can now attract a wider gamut of people. And I think both of these ideas can be true. It just depends on the circumstance. In photography business, it's actually relatively straightforward. If you live inside of London, in inner London, where you have a large audience within only a few square miles, millions of people, you can be very specific, you know, because your cake is pretty big. But if you live somewhere in the outskirts, in a village or a small town, that's specificity won't work anymore because now that very specific type of person that will buy a very expensive, I don't know, corporate headshot, there just aren't many of those, not enough for you to make a living on. And so there you're forced to diversify because now you have to do not only headshots, but you'll have to do family shoots and maybe some weddings and some other stuff as well. And in that situation, you just cannot, from a commercial point of view, you can't, specification isn't really going to work there. So there, the simple question of location will make the difference as to how you approach that,
Sure.
how you
I
approach the
mean,
business.
if we talk about festivals, this is what we need to understand. I mean, is as you said, wedding, for example, one festival has always been doing one thing over the last 5, 7, 10, 50 years, because they live on the same place, they talk with the same audiences, they do exactly the same. I mean, they are specified as something. If we get one small with a big one, someone from a big city with a small city, someone specialized in nature with someone specialized in analog, and they can learn from the other, that can really change the game. That is what we are looking for, because our experience is that everyone has been so close defending their own space, because obviously it's hard to have a festival and to maintain it and to do it for so many years and everything. But now we have all these new technologies, all these possibilities of getting in touch with others and knowing how other peoples are doing, uh, to make an update, to find a new way to do it, to try to do it different, more modern, more professional, to have more possibilities to connect with our audiences, old and new audiences, and bring in more people. And also to convince those who are giving you money to give you more money, because you are more modern, more interesting, you have more audiences, you grow more, and you are in a connection with an international community of photography festivals. We do believe this is kind of the moment, and it's what we need to do. I mean, we need to put the producers of the festival in connection with others, to learn from others, and to do a better job in the future. I mean, thinking on the festivals in 10 years, what is going to happen with these young people and with these old people? Where are they going to be, and what you are going to do with them?
How in how far do you link up with the photography industry, as in like manufacturers, for example?
You know how our association is connect with manufacturers?
Yeah. Like in do you connect with manufacturers? I mean, do you get interest from manufacturers? Like, let's say, the Fuji films and Canons of our age.
No, even with the festivals, it's really hard that they get connections kind of directly with the festivals. Private funding from companies of the industry is really, really hard. I mean, they just come, they put the booth, they sell what they do, but just receiving money like this is mainly impossible. I mean, you really need to be specialized in founding, private founding in countries that used to give money, like the UK or the US. The rest of the countries, private companies don't give any money, and it's pretty hard. I mean, that is kind of the experiences of the festival. You need to create long-term relationship that is just done by people that is so specialized in private funding. When we started with Experimental Photo Festival, we started with different brands and companies, and then people saw on our webpage that we have connections with them, and they say, "Okay, but you receive a lot of money from these companies," and we say, "No, we receive no money from them. I mean, they just send us gifts that we give to you, And then we put on our transparency webpage, we put private funding zero, just to specify that they were not giving us money, just things for them. And then on 2023, I realized I was spending so much time sending messages to these people, and they were not giving us any money. And I say, why? We can just take out all those names that are not giving us anything, and don't confuse our audience thinking that we have money. And we just take, and if you see now the webpage of Experimental Photo Festival, we just have institutions or companies that give us more than 1,000 euros. That this is just 1% of our budget.
Mm.
You are not going to see any company there. 1,000 euros, 1% of our budget, non-company is interested in giving us that minimum amount.
Mm.
We just took them all out, and not spending more time, because it's my time, it's my
Yeah.
money, and losing money asking for private funding in the state of photography companies now, at least.
What's your prediction for the future? Where would you like to see this going?
We are organizing this association of photo festivals. I want this to get big. I mean, I want 100 festivals to get connected. I want to have meetings every month, education for festivals, exchanging of exhibitions every month worldwide. I want to have this yearly meeting that we're having for the first time in Barcelona. I want 100 festivals coming every year to exchange exhibitions, doing portfolio review, learning from others. And I really want the festivals to get connected with their communities, to understand how to be more modern, to be more sustainable, to work more greener, to work with economical transparency, to work more modern. In the end, that's the thing. Society has changed. We need new festivals. I mean, no more festivals. We need the festivals that we have. That is crazy. We have 627. We need them to start a reflection, and we start from our festival, obviously, Experimental Photo Festival. We need to do a reflection on where we want to be in 10 years, and let's work together. I mean, we have the opportunity on internet to make video calls like this one for free. Okay, let's use it to learn from someone. You know something, I know something, we exchange, everyone is winning. Let's use this new economy on making better festivals for the future, for being there. This is the most important. We love the format of festivals. We want to go there. We want to have fun. We want to meet others. Let's keep this format alive. And the only way to keep it alive is to make it as important for the audiences as possible, to make what they want, what they need. You want to get together, you want to do workshops, you do workshops, you want to do exhibitions, you do exhibitions, you want experiences, you create experiences. This is what we need to think, and that is why we are getting together to learn from each other. In the end, that's the way, and generating networking, influences. That's what we are working for.
Fantastic. I mean, it's, this is a conversation that could go on absolutely forever. I know you have to go. Pablo, thank you so much for coming on the show. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Great to have Pablo back on the show. And if you enjoyed this episode, here's my recommendation for what to listen to next. Check out episode 245 with Peter Coulson. I'm sure you love it. If you'd like to support the show and help us keep creating more amazing content, consider buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/camera shake. Every little bit helps, and we truly appreciate it. And for those of you listening to the audio version, did you know we have a full video version over on YouTube? Head over to Camera Shake Podcast on YouTube to watch past episodes, see our guests work in full color, and dive even deeper into the creative process. If you're already watching on YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment, like, subscribe, and share this with your fellow creatives. It really does help spread the word. That's it for this week. Remember, new episodes drop every Thursday. Mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your creativity, and I'll see you next Thursday.